Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Far Above Rubies today. I'm so very glad that each of you are here. Today, as we're continuing our walk through our series on lessons from the wilderness, we're taking a look at the topic of don't touch God's anointed. Your reading challenge is going to be verses 1 through 8 of Numbers chapter 12. We're actually going to read it together here. I'm also going to read 2 Kings chapter 2 and verse 24, as well as 1 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 22. So we're going to start at Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. It says, "While they were at Hazeroth, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. They said, 'Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too?' But the Lord heard them. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. So immediately the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and said, 'Go out to the tabernacle, all three of you.' So the three of them went to the tabernacle. Then the Lord descended in the pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tabernacle. 'Aaron and Miriam,' he called, and they stepped forward. And the Lord said to them, 'Now listen to what I say. If there were prophets among you, I, the Lord, would reveal myself in visions. I would speak to them in dreams, but not with my servant Moses. Of all of my house, he is the one I trust. I speak to him face to face clearly and not in riddles. He sees the Lord as he is. So why?'" And here's our question for the day. "So why were you not afraid to criticize my servant Moses? The Lord was very angry with them, and he departed." It goes on from there, Numbers chapter 12. I hope you'll keep reading. We're going to stop right there. Why are you not afraid to criticize my servant Moses? 2 Kings chapter 2 and verse 24 tells us a story in one verse that Elisha was made fun of by a group of young boys and that he cursed them in the name of God, and 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of them. Word picture. 1 Chronicles chapter 16 verse 22 says, "Do not touch my anointed." The word anointed means chosen one. "Do not touch my anointed ones, and do not harm my prophets." There's a very clear message throughout the scripture that lets us know we are not to lay our hands or our words upon chosen, anointed men and women of God. Can they do no wrong? Are they perfect? Absolutely not. Should they be allowed to harm others? Absolutely not. But there are clear and dire consequences that happen when we touch the anointed of God, when we touch the chosen of God. Miriam was struck with leprosy, and she was healed after being out of the camp for 7 days. As long as there is no abuse, and we talked about this yesterday, as long as there is no abuse, physical or emotional, I would rather take my issues with a man or woman of God to the Lord himself and allow him to handle them and allow him to speak with them. I would rather remove myself from the situation if that's what I felt was necessary. As long as there was no physical or emotional abuse, I would rather remove myself completely from the situation than to touch God's anointed. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I have been at that situation at least twice in my life, my husband and myself, where we felt it was better to remove ourselves from the situation than to come against a man of God who had done wrong by us, because there was no physical abuse, there was no emotional abuse. He simply stood in the wrong. And we allowed God to handle that situation, and he did. God did handle those situations. He worked on our behalf. While we kept our tongue, while we kept our words, while we brought our issues to the Lord and said, "God, this is what's going on. You can handle him because he's your kid." And I'm grateful that we chose those decisions. I'm grateful we chose to remove ourselves rather than to touch God's anointed, God's chosen man of God for a place and a time and a season, and us to suffer the consequences. David was hunted by Saul, but because Saul was still God's anointed one, still God's chosen one, David could not bring himself to touch or harm Saul. David let Saul be handled by God, and he was far better off for it. I like to say, I'm still afraid of the bears. I'm still afraid of the bears. I'm still afraid the bears will come and get me. Should I lay my words in slander, in ill repute, in harm to the reputation of any man or woman of God? I am still afraid of the bears. I still believe that God will send the 2 she-bears to maul me right up. because that's what his word says. His word says, don't touch them, don't harm them, respect them. Why are you not afraid to criticize his servant? If you've got a problem with one of God's kids, take it to God. Take it to God. If it's something you can rectify, a problem to be resolved, do that. There's scripture for that. But don't criticize, don't slander, don't put down, don't shame, don't discredit a man or woman of God. You will be the one who ends up in the worst situation. Go read Numbers chapter 12 in its entirety. We read verses 1 through 8 today. I also read 2 Kings chapter 2 verse 24 and 1 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 22. And I hope that you take that away with you today and remember to still be afraid of the bears. If no one's told you lately, you are loved and you are cherished and you are valuable. You have beautiful and tremendous worth, my sweet friend, and that worth is far above rubies. Thank you for being here today, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. God bless you.